Good morning and good afternoon to everyone from wherever you're joining us. And hello, and thank you to the panelists who've come here today to join us. We're going to kick off panel number 3. This is digital transformation. I'm your moderator today, Sam Mirza. I head the corporate debt capital market space for Standard Chartered here in the region. And I'm going to start off by saying, I think, selfishly speaking, this is the most exciting panel of the entire session, okay? And I'm going to say that because it's true and because we're going to be talking about the cutting edge of finance. And if you ever wanted to get a sense of how dramatic that change is, just have a look at me and have a look at my audience, right? This is where finance is effectively going. I'm very excited to be able to be joined by panelists who are thought leaders, industry innovators, disruptors in the industry, and all of this that I just talked about is happening in the MENA region itself. So I'm very excited to welcome all of them here on stage. Let me start off with quick introductions. To my right, we are joined by Mr. Richard Teng, who is the regional head for the very well-known cryptocurrency exchange, Binance. We're also joined by Mo Ali Youssef. He is the regional manager for the digital payments giant Checkoutcom and an old friend. Along with him is Talal Taba. He is CEO of the homegrown Coin MENA exchange based in Bahrain. We also have Mr. Namir Khan, chairman and founding board member of the MENA Fintech Association. And on screens, hopefully you guys can see him, is our very own Gautam Jain from StanChart, a member of the StanChart Ventures team based in Singapore. Thank you for joining us as well, Gautam. All right, we're just going to get right into it. And I'm going to pick on you first, Richard. Look, Richard, you are sitting at the helm of a dominant large-scale crypto exchange everybody's aware of. What I'd like the audience to understand more than your traditional retail investment story of crypto and blockchain are the dynamic use cases that are coming out of the industry. So for example, international payments, securities processing, all of this is becoming the next frontier in the crypto world and the blockchain world. Help the audience understand a little bit about what that looks like and what are we most excited about in the next 2 to 5 years.
Thanks for having me, and good day to everyone. So just before I start answering your question, I think Binance is not only the largest exchange globally, but it's the largest infrastructure provider in the blockchain space, right? So we have multiple lines of products and services that cuts across not only the exchange side of things, but the different business lines, including technology, etc. So I will not elaborate on that, but on the best use cases that you're talking about, for blockchain, it tends to be in areas that traditional financial services don't serve as well, right? So I'll just give you a few examples. If you look at things like fundraising, you can do, if you have a good project, good idea, you can raise funds relatively easily, right? In the blockchain world. In crypto, using ICOs, IEOs, IDOs, whatever terminology that you call it, compared to the traditional space, right? Which would take months, if not years, to try to bring some of those fundraising efforts about. So it's very fast. In the payment space, again, domestic payment actually is very efficient, right? You can use your cards, Apple Pay, etc., etc. So domestic payment, by and large, are pretty efficient by now. Is the cross-border payments. With correspondent banking, you send something, you get it 2 or 3 days later after going through several rounds, and the fees are extremely high. So that space we see quite a fair bit of crypto adoption and changes. The NFT space, which allow for content creative people to monetize their content, right? So those spaces are really taking off in a very big way. Gamification, learn to earn, play to earn, etc., etc. So you'll see a lot of movement in that space. But generally, the entire Web3 ecosystem and economy will be contingent on crypto and blockchain. And for any countries, for any jurisdiction, any companies that wish to really embrace this space, devote resources into this space, really need to really adopt and embrace crypto and blockchain infrastructure.
And just piggybacking on that, international payments, I think that's gigantic open space. How far along are we in that? Is that a place where you think, the average business or individual can click a button and will be there in the next couple of years?
There are a lot of movement on that space, right? So if you look at in the past, 2 years back, be it global regulators or institutions such as yourself are not really looking so much into this space, right? But today, I think there's going to be a huge crypto adoption movement going forward because there are two key dynamics at play. Firstly, there are more and more regulators coming on stream to try to regulate this space, right? Having said that, still about 2/3 of global regulators are not regulating the crypto space, right? But they are trying to formulate their framework now, given the movement in this space, to try to regulate it. The second area is our institutions such as yourself. 2-3 years back, the narrative of institutions such as the likes of JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs are quite different. Today, any big, credible, international, regional institutions that do not have a crypto blockchain strategy is in danger, right? So those development and changes will bring about many more of these use cases about, and you're going to see quite a fair bit of crypto adoption. We are still in a very early stage, though. We are like 5% of global population having adopted crypto or some exposure to crypto. So if you put yourself way back in 1999 in internet, today the crypto adoption is less than internet adoption in 1999. And this is a technology you advance much more rapidly from now on, given the two dynamics as I mentioned. Having said that 5% have some exposure to crypto, probably less than 1% of global wealth is invested in this space. So we are still at a very early stage at this juncture.
Fantastic. You touched upon regulation, and Namir, I'm going to come to you in a little bit on that. And you also talked about the transformative nature of what old finance houses are going through. And Gautam, we'll talk to you about that in a bit. But Mo, I'm going to turn to you next. Payments, it's on everyone's mind. And I think, the biggest revolution that nobody predicted was the COVID era that kicked in a couple of years ago. I think a lot of folks back then said, once this phase is over, we're going to go back to our traditional brick and mortar shopping, go to the mall, that kind of thing, and buy the way we used to buy. I was just reading an article a couple of weeks ago talking about how that transition back to the way we used to be is not happening anymore, and there may be a permanent shift that's occurred. Now you're at the helm of one of these giant payment houses. Talk to us about what you've actually seen and where do you see this prediction going forward.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sam, and very nice to be here. So maybe just stepping back for a second, just to tell everyone about who Checkout.com is. So Checkout.com is a global payments provider. We basically help businesses, both Web 2 and Web 3, get money in and get money out. If you're based here in the region and if you order your taxis online, if you pay for your on Netflix online, if you order your food, groceries, etc., those payments are probably going through us at Checkout.com. We recently closed our $1 billion Series D round, valuing us at $40 billion. So we saw COVID have a tremendous acceleration in the way that consumers buy online, pay online. So I think there was a couple of things that happened. One is that this region is very much focused on cash, or it was very much focused on cash. There was a lot of mistrust in paying with a digital payment method. Customers didn't want to use their card online. They were worried that if they bought something through a mobile website or through an app, merchants would not actually deliver goods on time. They would not deliver what it was that they actually bought. And we saw a huge shift. So one of the studies that we did back in 2021 saw that 60% of consumers were actually trying online shopping for the first time. And we saw some very particular behaviors, right? So we saw, for example, families in Pakistan who were buying groceries online for the first time. And once they got into the habit, once they downloaded the app, they've saved their card, they saved their credentials, they now continue to use these different apps and service providers to actually buy groceries and food and so forth, right? One of the big drivers for this obviously was the whole contactless experience that people wanted, either voluntary or not. If consumers were not able to go outside the house, they were almost forced to download an app and order either retail goods or groceries or just basic household things. And then they were also not able to get cash. And so they were forced to use debit cards and credit cards and wallets to actually make payments. And so we saw a tremendous shift during 2020 and 2021. Actually, for Checkout.com globally, the business grew 3x in 2020 and 3x in 2021. So tremendous amounts of growth. Now that COVID has subsided, there is a bit of reduction in growth. We still continue to see the growth. There is obviously a revenge spending, as they call it. So customers are more inclined to travel. They might want the social element of going to the mall to actually buy something in a face-to-face space. But overall, the trend continues to kind of rise and is consistent. Customers have gotten used to the digital economy and purchasing things online.
So one of the things I've noticed is, certainly in Dubai and the country, is there's this, you talked about revenge spending, there's this massive influx into the malls like we've never seen before, right? So it feels like, it's almost doubled from what we used to remember. Are you saying that despite all of that trend kind of coming back, we're still seeing a growth in in digital payment spending above and beyond 2021?
Yeah, so we're still seeing that kind of trend going upwards. Customers did also save a lot, and so a lot of those savings have gone back into malls and travel, etc. But overall, that behavior shift has changed, right? So COVID gave us about a 5 to 10 year acceleration in terms of adoption, and that's something that we've kind of seen that behavior stay, and it's just not going back. So once a consumer enrolls into a digital payment method, or once a consumer downloads an app, that becomes a central part of their life, and it's very, very sticky.
No, it makes a lot of sense, and it's encouraging to see the trajectory continues. Namir, I'm going to turn to you. You're a fintech influencer, thought leader, innovator, disruptor. I could keep on going. There's a lot of great titles that I found for you. But you effectively have this bird's eye view of evolving patterns in the region from the fintech industry space. Everybody acknowledges the role of regulation, of the government, encouraging, developing, governing this space to grow. Without that, Richard talked about it, it becomes a much harder space for the average customer to trust, right? Can you talk a little bit about, how receptive have you found the local regulations and the financial regulators to want to go into this space? And, where do you see this going?
Thank you for having me. And so in terms of how receptive the regulators have been, so there have been fast adoption and there has been slow adoption, right? So it has been two segments that have happened. Slow adoption when it comes to, let's say, some of the mainland regulators, the adoption has been, I would say, a lot more slower than we expected. But when it comes to, offshore centers, such as the financial centers, ADGM and DIFC, they have been quite accelerated when it comes to their approach of adopting newer regulations. So for example, if you were to talk about, we were just talking about it earlier on, ADGM coming up with the crypto framework in 2017. So that was quite ahead of the curve, right? But whereas now we see, because that was setting the stage. So you can see it took like around almost 4 years for it to mature right now to at this point where you have, the receptiveness is a lot more faster, right? So previously it was a lot more slower, but now finally we have entered into that moment where the regulators are a lot more future forward. But that also comes down with the country leadership as well, because that significantly affects at the pace that we are accelerating. So now setting up a VARA, as Richard mentioned as well, right? So basically, that basically shows that now the regulations are basically progressing towards what either the global markets are doing or progressing further towards what the global markets had not done. That basically puts this stage on a much more higher level versus what other markets have not been doing. I mean, that's why you would talk about, Dubai becoming the crypto hub, right? Because you see everyone is now understanding that, number one, the infrastructure is there. Secondly, at the same time, the regulations are in favor as well, because now you have the promising VARA setup as well and many more. Now, that's on the crypto side. Now, when it comes to the other fronts, such as the payments, now what has happened is over the period of the past 3-4 years, there has been significant amount of push coming in from fintech enablers, Checkoutcom being one of them, right? So accelerating digital payments. Now, accelerating digital payments is closely correlated to how the consumer is adopting to it. Because if the consumer is adopting to digital payments, that is where these new models come in. Therefore, the regulators also then had the pressure of the consumer demand that the consumers are actually demanding it. Right? So how do we basically keep up with that? We have new fintechs coming in. How do we keep up with the pace of new fintechs coming in? At the same time, the regulations had to be developed at a much more faster pace. So I would say in 2021, Central Bank of UAE actually came up with 5 to 6 regimes, which was the fastest ever. So that shows that there is progression. Now, not just in UAE, but that also talks about what the region is doing. So at the same time, I mean, all of us on this stage would understand that SAMA has been quite progressive as well, right, in terms of adopting newer regulations, newer regimes. Bahrain, I mean, Talal would be able to give more insights on that, has been quite progressive as well. So you would see now the regulators being a lot more future forward, and the pace has really, really picked up versus what it used to be, and we all have been talking about it, what it used to be like a couple of years before.
Yeah, exactly. I just, you talked about 2017. I'm just going to, before we move ahead, I just, the gentleman who was kind of helping lead that happens to be the man sitting on my right, who was wearing a different hat back then. Richard, in terms of where we are today, now you got to kind of put on your old hat again. What you've seen from the regulators so far, is this cutting edge for the world, or are we catching up to other economies that are miles ahead of us?
I would say that, look, way back in 2017, when I was the CEO of Abu Dhabi Global Market, and we first introduced the crypto regulatory regime then, that was really forward-looking because nobody else in the world was quite there yet. And our thinking was very simple at that point in time. We do see this wave coming. To bring it mainstream and to give it credibility, you have to address the risk part of it while embracing the innovation, the growth part of it, right? Exactly. And without proper framework, you are not able to address the risk. And without addressing the risk, the institutions such as yourself, the retail customers, the corporates wouldn't be in, right? So that's why we formulated that. By now, I would say this region is very, very dynamic. Going back to the point Nami has mentioned, if you look at the Dubai Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority, it is, I believe, it's going to be the first in the world that just focus on crypto regulation. So it's a regulator that's specifically firstly set up to regulate crypto across the different business activities, from asset management to custody to exchanges to broker dealers, et cetera, et cetera. And that's very unique in the world. And the second thing that they have adopted that's quite unique is a public-private partnership to say, look, we may not understand what is the best-in-class technology, surveillance tools available, how do you do online tracking, et cetera, et cetera. We want to work very closely with the industry so that we have at our hands available all these tools that allow us to manage all this risk. And we are able to demonstrate to say that, look, people talk about crypto being used for money laundering. How many percentage of global money laundering takes place in crypto? If you look at data, that chain analysis and the US Financial Crime Office put out, less than 1%, right? So the narrative, the popular narrative and in the media, among institutions, among some regulators that don't deep dive into this space, that don't do a lot of homework will be, oh yeah, this is used for this is used for. But when you start to look at data, look at facts, it's quite different because there are tools to help track all these things.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you very much. That's, that's interesting data that you mentioned, because you're right. I think the narrative versus what's actually happening on the ground is very dislocated. Talal, let's bring a lot of what we just discussed back home. It's really exciting to me that you are the CEO of this homegrown, right, centralized exchange. Your founder said, Coin MENA is more than an exchange. It's on a journey to being MENA's preferred crypto financial services company, right? Thinking about regulation, and Bahrain clearly wants to be one of the leaders in this space in the GCC, and thinking about why Coin MENA started. What was the USP you guys are trying to address there? What are the nuances of some of the local investors versus internationally? Talk to us a little bit about that.
So first of all, Assalamu alaikum. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Talal. I work with CoinMina. Honestly, CoinMina came about because of a market need. It was more of a pull economic model rather than a push economic model. So in my previous crypto ventures, I'd started 2 crypto companies before CoinMina, and those were more experimentation, let's say, coming up with a product, trying to push it to the market and see if there's demand. But me and my partners realized that all people care about is how do I buy Bitcoin? How do I sell Ethereum? How do I move Saudi Riyals? How do I move dirhams? So we realized that the product or market fit or the market failure was people's ability to reliably deposit money and withdraw money. Because that's kind of the building block for any crypto implementation. Because if I went and asked my dad, like, hey, there's an interesting DeFi protocol where you can earn 10% yield. Like, all right, how do I get it to my bank account? Because that's what people are used to, or that's the majority of people what they're used to. So we said, okay, we'll start off with targeting the real market need, which is the ability to deposit fiat to crypto and crypto to fiat. But I'll be happy to admit that that's kind of the Trojan horse, because the way that we're moving with CoinMina is we'll technically become a bank without calling ourselves a bank. And I can imagine the legal team / regulators here are looking.
There's a couple sitting here, I'm sure. So.
So I guess in crypto, there's a lot of regulatory arbitrage, and I'll be happy to say that you can do that compliantly. If Uber had went around to every department of transport and said, hey, listen, we have this groundbreaking technology that moves people around, they'd have said, yep, go and apply for your taxi license, because that's how regulations work. They stifle innovation. Obviously, a good level of regulation allows innovation to foster, at the same time has some level of investor protection. But I honestly do think that the world overestimates how regulations protect retail investors. We've had one IPO that went completely bust on DFM. That doesn't mean that if you own equity, it is safer than a token. It's just that tokens are easier to issue, that there's more susceptible to manipulation and bad actors. So yeah, I guess there's an interesting trade-off to be made there. But crypto trading is just the tip of the iceberg. It is the most boring use case in crypto, but it's the one that got the most adoption. And it's important to acknowledge that it attracted a lot of speculators, right? It's a unique market that operates 24/7, that doesn't have a centralized price discovery mechanism. So let's say when COVID happened, NASDAQ puked, dropped 10%. US regulators were like, hey, yeah, stop trading. We're no longer a free market. And then next day, puked again. It's like, yeah, no more free market again. So I guess the point that I'm trying to make is crypto is a market that is the most free market in the world. Obviously, it's extremely immature, which means it comes with high volatility. But I do believe that over time, today, today crypto is a subsect of fintech. I think in 10 years' time, fintech will become a subsect of crypto.
Fantastic.
That's a good one.
Why based in Bahrain?
Why based in Bahrain?
Yeah. Talk to us about what is Bahrain trying to do?
So in 2015, I prepared a small study and sent it across the central banks in the Middle East, proposing they move 0.5% of their treasury to Bitcoin as a way to kind of hedge against the ever deteriorating purchasing power of the dollar. Obviously, no one listened. And took that advice. Central Bank of Bahrain were the only one to entertain me. And basically like, what the hell are you talking about? And they had planned to launch their crypto regulations. So I've been in constant touch with them for a while. But then when they launched their regulations, my friends and competitors at Rain were the first to go into the sandbox. We evaluated the different regulatory atmospheres. And quite honestly, the reason why we went for Bahrain is everything is under one roof. Because, again, talking about how regulations sometimes stifle innovation, there's many examples around the world where crypto was regulated using commodities regulation, like the CFTC in the US, or tried to box it under equities, or try to box it under something else. For us, we realized that the central bank might not be the best regulator to regulate crypto, but I have one critical stakeholder in my value chain, and that is the banks. Because if I'm regulated in Timbuktu, I can't open an account with BBK Bank in Bahrain because they don't recognize my license. So we thought the easiest way to market and the easiest way to solve our fiat to crypto and crypto to fiat problem is to become regulated by the same entity that regulates the banks. Now we've received our provisional license in VARA, which I do think is the best approach, creating a completely independent body that has buy-in from ESCA, the police, the government, the central bank, and basically any party that's going to be affected by crypto. And I do think that's going to be cross government department. So really excited to start operating under VARA, and I do think it's definitely the right move. And I guess one of the biggest proofs that it was the right move is you have the leading crypto exchange globally, Binance, coming up and setting up its home here.
That's true. Yeah. And I'm actually going to come back to that. I'm going to turn to Gautam, but before I go, I think it's obvious that Talal's T-shirt is the winner for a best exciting address here.
Mine is white, so
yours
is
a close second. No, I was going to say close second, but that's definitely number one.
No, I'm just going to touch on the point that Talal mentioned, which I think are just two very good points. I do think that he made a very good point, and we are also licensed in Bahrain. And the Bahrain Central Bank is a very progressive regulator that works very closely with the industry as well. And it's a very good regime as well. And it regulates across banks and intermediaries. So it's very easy to work in that regime. But on the point about market volatility that was mentioned, very early days, is a 2 trillion market cap. So for a 2 trillion market cap versus, if you look a couple of years down the road, if you're looking at 100 trillion market cap, it will be quite different volatility that you talk about, right? So again, it's a function of market cap, market size, the stage of development, and that volatility hopefully will also change as the market continues to mature and crypto adoption is being brought about.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Gautam, you're patiently waiting there in Singapore, but thank you again for joining us. You are part of the StanChart Ventures Group, which was established to promote innovation, invest in disruptive financial technology, and explore alternative business models. Like everyone else here in the audience, I'd like to give you an opportunity to talk to us a little bit about what's the goal behind StanChart Ventures, and give us a couple of success stories. Help us understand how this group is leading the way in fintech, please.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And apologies, I couldn't be there in person. But, wonders of modern technology. I'm right there with you. And I hear an echo. Can you guys hear me okay?
You're all good. We're here loud and clear.
Okay. Look, what happens is, we 4 years ago, when we were thinking about SC Ventures, it was based on the realization that technology has brought the financial services industry, especially banks, at an inflection point, and what is the way forward from there? And you hear the word digitization being bandied around very liberally in terms of the banks need to digitize, businesses need to digitize, et cetera, et cetera. But what does that actually mean, right? So most financial institutions think of digital disruption and digitization as a goal to digitize themselves to either become more efficient or serve their clients digitally, moving away from physical channels to digital channels, right? But is that all, right? I mean, we believe that this is necessary, but it is not really sufficient. Because while it is existential for institutions to digitize the channels, the real challenge is to start looking at their business models and what are the business models going to be of the future, and how do clients actually wish to be served in the future, and are the existing business models good enough for that, right? Richard said it in his opening speech, and thank you for giving me a perfect opening. Like, traditional banks don't serve well the clients of the future, right? So the whole point of SC Ventures was, what if a traditional bank started looking at serving clients in a non-traditional way? What if the bank itself starts creating disruptive business models which are either adjacent to what the traditional banks do, or in fact compete with the traditional banking business models? That was the whole idea of SC Ventures. So we would decide to do exactly that. In the bank, we were set up to promote innovation within the bank, act as a catalyst for the bank to start digitizing and innovating itself. Not that it wasn't doing it, but catalyst just like speeds up the process. But the primary purpose of SC Ventures was to build disruptive new business models as separate and distinct entities, in a way, create our own fintechs, own non-traditional companies. In addition, and start deploying capital in financial technology partners so that we can either learn from them, we can introduce their capability in the bank or in the ventures, and create this ecosystem of offerings, which we believe will not only provide optionality to the bank going forward, but also will be fit for purpose for clients of the future. Right? So in summary, what we do is we provide optionality, we look for value in strategic space, but more importantly, we look at banking transformation and ultimately serving customers the way they want and the way they will need to be served going forward. Right. So that was the whole idea of building SC Ventures. We are 4 years old now. Now we have about 30 ventures, which we have either launched, they are being commercialized, or in the process of being launched, or in the pipeline. We have deployed about $350 million in capital in our partners. We have taken strategic stakes. We are in close touch with about 1,500 fintechs across 30 countries. Yeah, evaluating product propositions, value propositions, investment propositions, and we have started working alongside 6 high conviction teams, which we believe are going to be the business models of the future. And I'll quickly rattle them through. We work on digital banking and lifestyle platforms. Our prime example of one of the ventures there is our digital bank in Hong Kong called Mox. We have e-commerce, online, and payments. We have a payments company called Zai, which is based out of Dublin. We have banking as a service called Nexus. The third theme, high conviction theme, is SMEs, world trade, and supply chain. As everybody knows, 60%, 60 to 70% of economies where we operate are driven by SMEs, but they continue to be the most underserved segments of the business societies. So we have started looking at a different way of serving SMEs, and our platform in India called Solve is intending to do just that. We believe, just like most of the panelists, that digital assets and tokenization is going to be a very, very prevalent asset class of the future. So we have created two crypto ventures, which are live and about to go live, called Zodia Custody and Zodia Markets, which is our custody, exchange, and brokerage platform for crypto assets for institutional investors. Our fifth theme is capability as a service. Bank have developed a lot of capabilities in-house, but they are not exposed to market forces to become either utilities or best in class. So capability as a service. And the last one, but not the least, which is very, very close to our heart as Standard Chartered, is sustainability and financial inclusion, against which we are going to launch several new ventures in the near future. Some of the examples you asked me about successes, as I said, Mox, which is our digital bank in Hong Kong, growing from 100,000 customers a year ago to 260,000 customers at the end of Q1. Our SME platform in India called Solve is currently now in 200 cities. We have almost 200,000 MSMEs on the platform, and we are processing about $250 million in gross merchandise value in about, I would say, 1.5 to 2 years. Our payments platform, Zai, is predicted to process about $20 billion in flows this year. Our health, wealth, and retirement platform, Autumn, is consistently showing double-digit growth in asset under influence. We have a nice and small venture in Singapore called CardSpal, which is a credit card reward optimization program. It has been the #1 lifestyle platform on the App Store for, I think, the last 8 months in Singapore. So, while we are new, we are seeing some extremely good traction in some of the ventures which we have built.
Fantastic. Thank you for giving us that roundup, Gautam. That's exciting, and it's good to see that old banking is giving some of these gentlemen here a run for their money. That's exactly what I want to see. All right, we're going to turn into the Bonanza round. I call it Bonanza round. I'm going to merge some of the questions that have come in along with some extra questions and shoot it out. And folks, please piggyback on everyone else's comments and make the conversation rich. Mo, let me start with you. So checkout.com, it's everywhere. When you said what you said about Pakistan, I want to call my mom and see if she's actually using that to order groceries. It's very exciting. But I want to ask, are you guys at the sort of market share point where, okay, we've taken everything that we could take and now we got to branch out? I was reading online that when it comes to digital payments, the next frontier is monetizing data. You're sitting at this wealth of data coming in, you know where the money's going, where it's coming from. Talk to us about, are you at that market share point and what's next?
Yeah, so if you look at payments just in the US, a company like Visa only has about 10% of the total payments volume in the US, right? So there's tons of volume to grow domestically across the world and stuff as well. When it comes to data, data is something that we are extremely careful with. Ultimately, we believe that the data belongs to the consumer and belongs to the business, and we actually don't monetize that except to provide value back to the businesses themselves.
Great, fantastic. Let me turn my attention to Namir. I don't know where it was brought up, sustainability. I think Gautam talked about that. Broad question, is there a space for ESG in fintech? And what does that look like?
Oh, humongous. So typically, I'll just give you a broader and overview of what's happening, as we head towards net zero. It's estimated that almost $9 trillion need to be invested annually for us to be able to hit net zero by 2050. Right. So that tells you the tremendous amount of capital that is going to be injected within this space. Another indicator that I'll give you is around 700 deals were done in the sustainability fintech space last year. Around $40 billion were already invested in just last year in 2021 towards sustainability. Out of that, $1.4 billion has been invested into fintechs in sustainability itself, which is again a 3x of what was happening, in the year before. And why is that happening? Let me tell you, is because that by the end of the day, if you break down fintech, I mean, typically, as we have seen, it's payments, it's understanding how new methods of payments have come in. At the same time, why fintech has a role in this is because there has been a debate happening already that there has been, and please, I'm going to be a little critical over here, that there has been a lot of greenwashing happening, that despite the fact the financial existing system is still supporting fossil fuels, it's still supporting industries that are basically producing a lot more carbon in the market, right? Now, alternates where that is also in place. We have the banks like Aspiration, Tread, Economy, which is one of your partners, by the way, and many others that have emerged over the past couple of years, and they've become unicorns within the shortest amount of time, right? That tells you that people are demanding fintechs and technology companies that are basically enabling the transition. Now, why is this transition important? The way fintech starts from payments, sustainability also starts from payments. Because if I'm basically making a payment, or if I'm actually purchasing something, that is the opportunity at that point of time to make awareness for the consumer to understand, hey, this is your impact. Would you like to basically offset this, or at least try to put the awareness out? So payments at this point of time plays a fintech that is starting in payments for sustainability and covers a couple of angles. Number one, a very important piece is awareness amongst the consumer, which is what they're demanding at this point. Now, why are the customers demanding? At this point of time, as per the research, 91% of the consumers will actually switch your banking products if the bank is not sustainable. 91%. Right? So that is telling you that the consumers are demanding it. Now, who is the consumer? Is Gen Zs and the Gen Ys fine, and the millennials that's making almost 75% of the population that we're talking about. But at the same time, it's now the mindset, right? So I mean, for me and everyone some of you may agree, some of you may not agree, but it's more of a mindset. It's not an age thing. It's a mindset, right? So eventually all of us and majority of the people who are out there are now demanding it. So fintech plays a critical role in that, right? When it comes to enabling sustainability. Simultaneously, what fintechs are doing differently versus the existing financial infrastructure is that we're also sourcing quality projects, sustainability-focused quality projects. There's another thing that they've gone an extra mile and do it, right? I mean, not basically, and creating financing for projects, because eventually if you were to hit net zero, then you need to, there's something called green premium. Green premium is like when you're, I mean, if you have green fuel, you have to pay an extra premium for that. And of course, with more consumption, there's going to be economies of scale. So typically, these fintech projects are doing a couple of things. Number one is that they're basically funding, they're number one, sourcing the right projects globally. That could be carbon capture, that could be, char chemicals or whatever it is, right? So many of them. Once they source them, and second, they create funding enabling for them. Now, once funding comes in, the cost of actually producing or actually scaling that specific sustainability-focused project reduces significantly. So fintech has a critical role to play, and talking about this region, COP27 in the region, COP28 in the region is going to be a boom.
Yep. So you're seeing yourselves as a bridge, not only connecting, but also creating, helping to develop those sustainable projects and bringing that money into those so that people can do that. I like that 91% data point that you brought up, that folks would move out if they're not seeing their finance houses be sustainable the way they expect them to.
So there was a thought to this. I was having a conversation with someone that said, oh, it's a thought of the thought. But then if you look up the data points, the consumer is actually putting it on the top.
Yeah.
So previously, consumers basically did the comparison between how easy, convenient, accessible, affordable, and delightful your product may be. But now there's another one. How impactful are you?
Exactly right. Fantastic. Thank you. Just noticing running out of time, there's one thing we can't go without talking about. I want to target the two exchange houses here. Metaverse, right? Metaverse, always the metaverse. Very exciting, really bleeding edge. We talked about Dubai Zavara. It's out there. There's a metaverse-based headquarter in the virtual world. You guys have a license for that. Gentlemen, talk to us about, is this sort of something exciting people throw out to get the headlines? Is there a future here? What does it look like? Maybe Talal, we'll start with you.
So perfect example of the Gartner hype cycle when new technology comes out. Initially, there's an explosion of interest and you see exponential perceived adoption. And then kind of the light goes on and people realize that there's not much there. So you see an insane crash and then you see sustainable growth. I was doing some research on the daily active users of Decentraland, which is one of the largest and most valuable. It's a couple of thousand users. We have more active users, and we're probably like 2% of their market cap. So again, that's about what's branded as the metaverse today. I think it's bullshit, but that's just my opinion. But I do think that what's described as the metaverse, we've technically been living in since 2005 when the iPhone first came out. Because the way that I define metaverse is when we have reached the metaverse is when my digital being is more important than my physical one. I'll give you an example. My grandfather, if he had gotten a nice bonus, he would have brought a nice watch. My younger sister is looking to buy an NFT to put as her Twitter profile picture. So the way that humans interact socially has become natively digital, as opposed to interests being analog in the traditional world. So online, Zoom calls is technically the metaverse. If you pay more attention to your phone than you pay attention to the traditional world, then in my opinion, you would have escaped the analog world and moved into the metaverse. Obviously, there's a lot of investor appetite, and that leads to lots of projects popping up like mushrooms. Most of them will fail, but the ones that do succeed will have a big impact. And I guess final point from my side, I don't think it'll be the incumbents that come out with the metaverse. So for example, Facebook's rebrand to Meta is a classic example of a company trying to make the move to what's cutting edge, but I don't think they'll actually make it. That's like a dystopia metaverse, in my opinion, controlled by Mr. Zuck and his crew.
Okay. But it's still a good idea for me to buy a farmhouse in the metaverse somewhere, is what you're saying.
Depends on what you're looking to do with that farmhouse. Yeah, like I think
there's a future.
In the future, even today, like I own a couple of plots of land, unfortunately. I don't own any real estate in the real world, but I do own a couple of plots of land in that. And obviously my mom's not too happy about that. But my sister is, because she asked me to lease one of my lands so she can attend the concert. That, like, there was a concert in the metaverse that you could only attend if you owned that plot of land. And I had one. So I actually leased it out to my sister, and she paid me some interest for that lease. So it's yeah, it's a little bit crazy.
It's an exciting time. It's an exciting time. That's fantastic. I'm guessing Binance didn't get a license to have a concert or anything like that. So tell us what the purpose of you guys being part of all of this is.
No, I just echoing what Tyler has mentioned. So there's a hype aspect of everything, right? So you just cut out the noise and look at the use cases, an example of it, right? I think people should really focus on that. Do your own research is what we always say. Do your own research. When you want to invest money, make sure that you invest, those are hard-earned money. Make sure you invest prudently. So look at the real use cases. We are still very early days in the metaverse world, right? How you take off, how you evolve is anybody's guess. It's a way of engaging. As Tala has mentioned, he has given some examples. I mean, people are holding concerts in there. You can only attend if you have certain presence in there. You have countries setting up embassies. You have accounting firms such as PwC. I mean, accounting firms are supposed to be very conservative players, right? Setting up metaverse headquarters, etc., etc. So you are seeing a lot of movement in that space. How that will evolve and how that will develop, nobody will know, right? You don't have a crystal ball looking into the future, but it's a form of engagement, especially for the millennials, right? How do you have better, for corporates such as yourself, how do you have better user engagement, right? Customers engagement. How do you bring them into Web3 space? How do you make sure that you share your benefits, not only retaining the benefits at the builder owner level, but how do you share benefits with the users ultimately, right? Which is what the Web3 world is about. So how do you bring some of those use cases about is something that we are watching very closely. We can't anticipate, we can't foresee the future, but some of the best minds are working in this space. So it'll be quite interesting to see how that develops over time.
One point from my
side. If I may just interject there. Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about maintaining optionality, right? As Richard points out, I don't know how this space is going to space is going to evolve. What if commerce starts happening in metaverse? Would you require an intermediary like a bank to facilitate that commerce and facilitate payments? Do you require a payments company in the metaverse to facilitate those payments? Don't know how it's going to evolve. So, full disclosure, we recently bought a land in metaverse as Standard Chartered Ventures, and we have set ourselves down to how it is going to evolve.
Gautam, we're losing you a little bit.
Use cases there. Sorry, am I back on?
Yep.
Yeah. So if banks and financial institutions, along with organizations like yours, can actually create or influence use cases, we would be very welcome to have a conversation. But net, we can't ignore metaverse, even if at this point in time we don't know what to do with it.
Absolutely. That's all you were saying.
The technology to actually move into the metaverse is not there, and this is a prime example when you have Skype and Zoom calls not having a lag. It makes you realize that technology is still not there. But I have an opinion on why companies like PwC, Visa, and others made the move into the metaverse. From an accounting standpoint, marketing has traditionally been a P&L entry. Now, for the first time, you actually have marketing initiatives that are on your balance sheet. So, for example, Visa, when they bought their Bored Ape or Punk, I forgot which one it was. Punk, yeah. So they bought it for, I think, 200K. Traditionally, that would have been a cost item on their P&L. Ended up being an asset that appreciated by 6x and got them insane amount of reach. Obviously, NFTs are insanely illiquid. So similar to art, you don't buy it if you want to sell it again soon. But for big companies like PwC, Visa, etc., it's an asymmetric bet where you're buying this asset and you position yourself as a cutting-edge brand, even if you're not.
Absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, look, everything that you guys discussed to me feels like it's what we're going to touch and feel in the next 3 to 5 years. There's going to be a lot of, you talked about, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to bubble up and just going to pop never going to see them again. But this is where the innovation and drive comes from. And frankly, houses like ourselves are entering the game and kind of following your lead to see kind of where a lot of this kind of shapes up. Folks, I'd love to sit here for another hour and keep discussing. One of you should hand out Bitcoin to everyone who attended here. If you guys have that, they just line up. But
has to be Richard.
We'll start with Richard to come to you. But
BNB.
I'll take it.
But I want to say thank you guys for taking time out. I know you guys have a lot going on your plate. It means a lot to us that you came out here. I was told that we have an insane number of people on the virtual connection on the website. So thank you again, and thank you for all of you attending today. Please stick around before we give our applause and thanks to our team. Stick around till 1 p.m. Dubai time. We do have the remapping opportunities panel. Why 2022 could be an interesting year for the bold and the brave. So please do join us for that. And in the meantime, thank you very much to the panelists.
Thank you. Thank you.